Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Restorative Justice webinar series from the Zehr Institute for Restorative Justice at Eastern Mennonite University's Center for Justice and Peace Building. That sure is a mouthful whenever I say all that. We have a great webinar coming up today. My name is Brian Gum, and I'm going to do just a little bit of a technology orientation for the folks who are on the webinar. To let you know kind of how this format works and how you can interact with Howard and our guests for the webinar today, because we certainly want to be able to give you the opportunity to feed back into the conversation, ask questions, make comments. We really welcome that. So even though you'll be seeing and hearing us, we won't necessarily see your faces or hear your voices. But we definitely want to hear from you throughout the course of the webinar. And the way to do that is through the Q&A button that is located in the window that you're watching this in. And I can't remember exactly where it is. It might be up in the top right corner for the folks who are watching. And if it's not there, look somewhere else around the window. There will be a Q&A button that should be plainly visible to you. And if you click on that, it brings up a little box where you can type in questions or comments. And we, as the panelists, are kind of keeping an eye on those questions that are coming in, and want to allow you a way to feed into the conversation. So don't hesitate to make use of that Q&A button. For any types of questions or comments throughout the course of the webinar today. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to the host, Howard Zehr, my former professor. Howard, you can take it away.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm excited about this, both because I enjoy doing these and because it's a chance to see and speak with Halbert. I haven't been able to talk with her for quite some time. Our topic today is restorative justice and victims, reflections from a survivor and practitioner, and the guest is Halbert. She's in Texas at the moment. You'll see some of the things that she has done here on the board. We'll be talking more about that, but she spent a lot of time as Director of Victim Services at the Travis County District Attorney's Office until she retired just pretty recently, 2013. She also served 6 years on the Texas Board of Criminal Justice and has been a co-facilitator for a monthly support group for victims of violent crime for 10 years. She edited for a number of years a journal called Crime Victims Report, an award-winning newsletter. I had the honor of being on her advisory board during that time. She serves on several other boards, and she's been highly recognized for her contributions. But we're going to talk with her about that. I'm going to stop this and go to a different format. So hopefully you'll just see the two of us, and Brian is sitting there, and a still picture of him as well. So welcome, Ellen. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I've been excited about this ever since we talked about it.
Well, I'm glad, and we're doing it a little different. We're going to do it as kind of a conversation or an interview rather than have you present this time. So the PowerPoint is gone for now. We'll come back toward the end of the session.
Okay.
Now. Mm-hmm. So the place I'd like to start is having you tell us more about what you do, what your career has been, and how you got into it. What started all this for you? How did you get into this field?
Well, you mentioned before that I've been a victim of crime, and that's really where it all came from. I was a victim of crime in 1986. That was a long time ago. Gosh, but sometimes it seems like it's yesterday. But anyway, I had a kid, really, a drifter, 18 years old, had broken into my house and spent the night in the attic. And the next morning, he surprised me in my bathroom. He was dressed in a ninja suit with everything covered except his eyes. And in his right hand, he held up high over his head, he had a big knife. During the next 2 hours, I was raped. I was stabbed 4 times, twice in the back of the neck. once in the left breast, and he hammered a knife into my skull. And in between all of that, he beat me in the head with a hammer. It was such a mess. They couldn't tell out how many blows, but they think 8 to 10. And when you get hit with the hammer in the head, what the skin does is it just breaks out into pieces like this. So most of the time they operated on me, they spent a lot of time trying to stitch those pieces together. And I had over 500 stitches in my head. And it was a horrible thing. It was such a brutal crime that my family thought I was going to die. And the doctors told me later they couldn't believe I did. But, I did learn some things from that. And it didn't take long for me to figure out, when I was trying to get better, to heal myself, that I was going to have to forgive him. I couldn't be the kind of, mother or daughter or community member if I carried that kind of rage and anger around in my heart. And so I did it. I forgave him. It was a little journey there, but I was committed, and so I did. And long at the same time, that power of forgiveness really helped me. It just released me from everything that I had been going through. And I also learned the importance of telling your story, telling your personal story. This has been, 28, 29 years, and I still tell my story to anyone who will listen. And fortunately, I have a few people out there in prisons and state jails and things who really want me to come tell my story, and I love doing it. And I can tell you from personal experience, though you think that you've healed, you always think you do, but every time I tell my personal story, I heal a little bit more. It's been a wonderful time in many aspects since then, feeling so strong and able to do things and getting involved in the restorative justice movement. But that's how I got involved.
Where did that impetus to forgive come from?
Well, it was kind of, as I mentioned, that I just knew that I knew there was a power in forgiveness, and I knew that I couldn't be the kind of person I wanted to be unless I got that rage and anger out of my heart. And so I worked on it, and I did. I forgave him. It wasn't anything I said to him in person, but it relieved me inside of how I'd been feeling, how horrible it was. So, boy, do I believe in the power of forgiveness.
It's interesting, because as I know you, you're not you're not a pushover. You're not, you ask tough questions. It's not like this is some easy journey. What do you say to other people how do you handle this? Forgiveness is a tough subject in this field.
It is, but I had been doing some reading about it, and I knew that's what I needed to do. And, my parents suffered. My dad grew another tumor of cancer in record time. My mother's eyes went bad. My daughter was scared to be alone by herself, and I knew I had people to take care of, and I just couldn't do it, feeling the way I did.
So how do you help when you worked with so many victims over the years? How do you address this issue of forgiveness with them?
Sometimes I don't talk about it a whole lot. All the victims I worked with, I was on that board for 6 years, and during the time on the board, I was able to spend not only times learning the criminal justice system, boy, that was amazing, and but I had some time to learn about restorative justice, and I had some guidance with that because our DA, Ronnie Earl, and I were friends since the trial, and when I went on that board, he was telling me, oh, you need to go here and you need to go there, and so by the time I retired in 6 years, in the board in 6 years, I had been on quite a journey, and wouldn't take a minute of it away. And so then he hired me. He just had an opening as director of victim services, and one of the first things that I wanted to do is get involved in restorative justice. So when I talk to victims, I never tell them my own story. They may know because it was headlines in the newspaper, but I never talk about me. I just talk about them. And I just learned a way to talk to them later on about what it does for them. they don't have to say it to the offender, but it's what it does for them personally to have forgiveness in their heart. And some would take my advice and some didn't, but the ones that did learned for themselves the power that is in your life. So I just did my best. And you're right, I'm not a pushover.
Now, you ask hard questions. But did the person who did this, was he apprehended? Did you go through it with justice?
Yes, that's interesting too. Yes, he was caught, and we went through a trial, a really quick trial, 3 months after what happened to me. I was still bald. One side of my head was bald, but I did wear a hat. Anyway, he was found guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison. But in Texas, in 1986, life in prison meant 20 years. So I've been fighting his parole since 2006. And actually, he is being looked at right now as we do this webinar for parole. And I'm going to talk to a parole board member on February 3rd next week. Y'all, everybody who's listening, please pray for me that he stays in, because he is a very dangerous, dangerous man.
Is he mentally ill? Do you know?
Yes.
Yeah. Was the justice process a good one for you?
Yes. It was I remember my sister was there, and she has since passed away, so has my father. And I remember she said, just keep looking at me. Just keep looking at me. Don't look at him. And his attorney was scared of him. Oh, he wouldn't get dressed to go to the trial. He kicked some guy that was taking pictures of him, movie pictures of him, who was crouched down on his knees. He kicked him in the face. And so he was just trying to be a tough guy. And so I liked it. I was glad we went through a trial, because I had a time to address him. Now I would have anyway, but it was a good process. Good process.
That's kind of unusual I don't hear that very often from people who've been victimized. What made yours then different? Was Ronnie Earl was the DA?
And yes, and he was there, and I, as I say, got to know his wife and Ronnie at the trial, and he made it better. But we had a wonderful defense attorney too. I mean, not defense attorney. We had a good defense attorney, but my prosecutor was really good. Okay. And he just told a good story. And they had me take off my hat and show my head to everybody, and all the scars in my head. And it wouldn't grow hair for a long time. So 3 months later, I still didn't have any hair. Had to have plastic surgery actually too. And it was a good process. The courtroom was full. All my family members were there. We took pictures afterwards. We were really happy that it turned out the way it did. I never hated him even then. I didn't feel sorry for him, and I didn't forgive him at that time. But I was really glad that he went to prison, because I knew then that he was dangerous.
The fact that he was so obviously mentally ill, was that kind of a helpful thing? It gives you some kind of explanation, I suppose.
Well, I didn't really know it at the time. I just knew he acted like that. But later on, probably 6 or 7 years, maybe 5 years, I don't remember, I got a call from one of his family members. It was his brother-in-law. And he wanted to tell me about him. And he actually was a drifter who'd run away from the criminal justice system in Cincinnati because he had attacked his brother-in-law with a hatchet. But he told me that he had a black father and a white mother, and his mistress lived with the family. And the father was into witchcraft, and the son was the youngest son, and he involved his son in a lot of that. And I remember hearing, tales about him having nightmares about his dogs being murdered as part of the witchcraft. So, I just think that his upbringing and how he was treated was the reason that he's the way he is. Yeah. It didn't make me want to let him out, but I know there were a lot of reasons that made me feel so sorry for him.
Yeah. Well, what would you say to there are a lot of other jurisdictions that obviously aren't as victim sensitive as yours was. What would you say to those jurisdictions, or how can they make, restorative justice aside, that's something we're going to talk about next, but what can be done to make the justice system as we know it more victim sensitive?
I thought about that a lot, and there's always parts of the system that are going to be insensitive to victims, from police all the way through the system. But I would think that probably better training. I remember going to a training where I taught something about victims, where prosecutors all went, and it was just the beginning of us ever having a role in these kinds of conferences. And what I think is really good training by people who know what they're doing. And of course, we have rights in legislation, but they don't pay any attention to that. So I think training would help. I just think more sensitivity to victims, however they have to do it. Maybe more impact panels, because you certainly feel it through an impact panel.
Yeah.
I think probably I could think the rest of the day and not come up with enough ways to make it more friendly.
Yeah.
It's just, oh my gosh, it's so much better than it used to be. It's just still not as good as it could be.
Yeah. Well, where does restorative justice fit in all this for you? But maybe talk a little bit more about your own involvement in it. You early on, Ronnie and others introduced the concept of how have you been involved in it?
Well, when I did my 6 years on the Board of Criminal Justice and Ronnie hired me, the first thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to do a mediation with my offender. I wanted to see him face to face, because I knew the healing that could bring in that. And so I called our victim services people here in Texas Department of Criminal Justice Victim Services Division, and they sent one of their mediators. They already had that program there. And they sent one of their mediators to talk to him, and he would not have anything to do with me. And the reason was he didn't want to admit his guilt. Now, he did later on. There's lots to that story, but I didn't get to do it, and so I decided to be a mediator. And I took the training that Victim Services offered, and the man that trained me, it was a week-long training. It was very, very good. The man that trained me is a man named David Durfler, and I think, Howard, you know him.
Oh, yeah.
And he's just a love, and he was so good with that training. They don't offer it anymore, so people who want to do the kind of work I do have to get their training in other places.
It was very in-depth training and a very in-depth process that both victims and offenders went through in that process.
Yeah. And the very first case after I got my little license was meeting with a killer. That was the first case I ever did. And once that was over, then I came back to the office and I started. Ronnie just said, just do it. Just do whatever you want to do. And but I didn't pick the cases. The cases were brought to me, and I started doing cases in my office, all kinds of cases. And then I did community circles, community healing circles. So I was very busy because I was doing all of this in addition to my real job that kept me really busy.
Right. And by the way, let me remind viewers, send your questions in and comments. We'll try to address them along the way here. Well, let's talk about that case. I didn't know that was your first case. I didn't realize that.
No.
You did.
Well, when I was doing it, I was talking with David a lot. I probably talked to him every day. And the worst thing about the case is I had to go to Houston for the victims, and then I had to go to Wichita Falls to the Allred unit for him. And it's about 5 hours by car. And the woman who was filming it had a budget, and so we were actually able to fly there, and that made a lot of difference. And the woman that filmed it she won lots of awards. I mean, her name is Lisa Jackson, and she's done so many things. Y'all should Google her. But they were great. She had a film team, and they filmed us the whole way, and you never even knew they were in the room. And of course, little Gary. Golly, I know you'll have questions about him, but I really kind of fell in love with him too.
Yeah.
What a life he led or had had.
Oh, it comes so clear in that film. Well, many people have seen that film. Lisa's made this thing generally available. Amy have been very open to having it shown, and we often use it in trainings, not because of the outcome, although I want to talk about that, but because we see something of each step in the preparation, and there's lots of videos about these encounters, but there's so few that show you that.
Well, and it was nominated for an Emmy.
Yeah, it wasn't really.
Oh, yeah, and I was thrilled to death, but Lisa Jackson wasn't. She wanted to win. It was shown in 2001 for the first
Really?
time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, you do such a good job at each step to that. I mean, that's just impressive. So can you talk about that? I mean, what was it like to do that? Were you frightened, or was it this first case?
Well, yeah, no, I really wasn't frightened. As I say, the worst part was trying to get there. But I had David to guide me, and I knew the kinds of questions to ask him. Um, and next time I went to see him, I would ask tougher questions than I did the time before. Well, it made me a little nervous. I had no earthly idea that it would be the hit that it was. But I knew that I was getting to do something very special, to film a mediation behind prison walls. I felt so lucky to be able to do that. It was great.
Would have made me nervous to have a film crew follow me, I think.
They never even knew you were in. I mean, you couldn't tell they were in the room.
Really?
They were just so quiet behind those cameras, never said a word. And then, it'd be over and Gary'd go back to his cell and we'd leave and we'd talk about everything. It was a wonderful period of my life.
There must have been challenges. What were some of the challenges you had to sort through as you did it?
Well, we thought that maybe we might have a challenge with the warden at the time, but we didn't. It may have been helpful that I had been on the Board of Criminal Justice for a while.
I'm sure it was.
But anyway, whatever it was, everybody kind of paved the way for us. They always have a shortage of guards in the prison, and we had one with us, but not in the room the whole time. We had a little glass on the door, and he could kind of look in to make sure that everything was going okay. But as far as the real challenges, we had a pretty easy time. I'd have to think hard to think of any. Maybe it's just because I loved what I was doing so much.
Well, Amy and Linda were good people to do your first one with.
Oh, yes, I know. And Linda White and I still tell our story. She's going to come here next week. Well, she's going to come here on the 6th or 7th of February, and we'll go up to UT to a restorative justice class they have up there, and they'll show the film and we'll tell our story. I love getting together with Linda. We don't get to do that enough.
Yeah, she's good.
Mm-hmm.
If you look back at that case, is there anything you would do differently?
I don't know. When I see it, and I've probably seen it 100 times, I don't ever think about it. I don't think about anything that I think that I didn't do. I just love that they made the film. Lisa Jackson made the film the way she edited it, to have him talking, and walking around, and it was a masterpiece, and she was really responsible for that. I was just kind of one of the people that went along to ask the questions.
Well, one of the things that comes through in that video is your non-intrusive style. You're listening. I mean, you'd almost think you weren't there, in the actual encounter. That's your style generally?
Yeah. Yes. Well, you can't do the kind of work that I wanted to do, and I hope I did do with victims if you're not a good listener.
Yeah.
And I knew I needed to be a good listener for Gary. Gary had a lot to say, and sometimes it took him a while to get all the words out. And then when I actually did the mediation between them, that was really powerful, really powerful.
Was it hard for you to work with him? I mean, here you are in victim services, and now you're having to work empathetically with.
Yeah. Well, he just had this way of, he was just, I think I said it even in the video, that I looked at him like a little boy. He reminded me of a little boy. It was hard not to like Gary. And so did Linda, and so did Amy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he had clearly been through so much.
Yes.
Everybody in the room could hardly take it.
And I thought maybe when prosecutors saw that show, the documentary, I thought maybe they might come to me, because I wanted them to watch it and then tell me what they thought. And I thought some of them might say, oh, he was just lying. Yeah, he wasn't telling you the truth at all. Not one person said that to me, and I was expecting it because some tough prosecutors watched. Not one. They just thought it was a magical kind of documentary, and they loved it.
At the end, Amy and Linda choose to forgive, and
Mm-hmm.
that is always raises an issue because and this is a question that's come here while we're talking, and that is the whole question of forgiveness. Here's the question that they're asking. I think forgiveness is a trigger issue for many victim survivors. Is that necessary for something to be considered a restorative justice?
Oh, gosh, no. In fact, in all the cases I've done, since I went to work at the district attorney's office, while I was working at the district attorney's office, some chose to forgive and some didn't. But they had made a connection in a way, and they got to hear someone admit what he had done or she had done and tell them how sorry they were. They had the opportunity to say things they would never get to say in a courtroom. That's just, I never did one case where any of the members of it wish they hadn't done it, ever. They just didn't all forgive. I mean, my goodness.
Oh, no. Yeah, exactly. I would say the same thing. But curious what you would say. And Gary is out now, is that right?
Yes.
How's he doing? Do you know?
He's doing very well.
Is he?
He went to Beaumont at first to take part in a sex offender not support group, but a session where they worked with sex offenders. And he was still in jail for a long time, and then they let him get his own apartment. And had a hard time finding a job, but he just kept doing it and ended up finding a good job. And he's had different people in his life, and he's got a young woman in his life right now that really loves him, and her parents love him. And he's getting ready to have a birthday, and on February 4th. I can't remember how old he's going to be. I'm going to have to ask him because I'm going to talk to him this weekend. And she said they're going to give him a fishing pole for his birthday.
That's a good thing.
He loves to fish. And of course, he couldn't do that for a long time. But there was one time his parole officer looked the other way, and he did go on a fishing trip out in the water, though. I got lots of pictures of fish from that one.
And the co-defendant, that is he's still in. There were two of them, right?
Yes. And the other one was too mentally ill for me to have any kind of mediation with him. So Gary was really the only one that we could do.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Well,
you've done other cases since that time, it sounds like.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I have. But I haven't done anything like Meeting with the Killer. I've never had them filmed or anything like that.
Right. Most
of them have taken place in Travis County. And, but, when the community is always harmed, no matter when a crime is there. But in some cases, I would have like 3 or 4 young burglars that would break in houses when people were gone. They caught them. And so I got all the community members who'd been harmed to get in a circle. And we had people from the DA's office and from the police department, and they had their support group in there too. The offenders did. And it's just a magical thing. I keep using that word, and I'm going to try and stop, but that's how you feel when it's over. Yeah. You're just walking about 2 feet off the ground. Did I really see all that happen? One of the victims' father wanted to take one of the offenders home with him and give him, some lessons on just how to be a good community member, how to be a good guy. And of course that didn't happen, but it was just, it ended up in some ways being kind of a love-in. Once they said their piece and they listened to the young men, it was just fabulous. I wish more people did it.
How many people would you have had in a circle like that?
I probably had about 20, and I always used a talking piece, and people didn't have to talk, and this is what I used. I always loved this because it's kind of a circle that never ends. I just thought it was very appropriate to use in a circle. And I didn't like to have great big circles, but every now and then I did. And not everybody talked, but it worked out well. I used this in every circle, even the ones I did in my office. They passed it back and forth and with me.
You know, for the Maori in New Zealand, that's a koru. It's called a koru. It's the symbol of a fern frond opening, and they see it somewhat similarly as this circle, but yet it's open to the future, and it's
Open
growth.
to the future.
It
Mm-hmm.
symbolizes new growth and new possibilities and so forth. So it's interesting that you're using one. I often use one as well.
I know people use different things.
Yeah.
I mean, if I forget it, I could just pick up anything and make it a symbol. Well, maybe not anything, but you can use anything. This is just the one I used.
So it's best if something symbolic to the people, to you,
Yes.
or people in the group.
Mm-hmm.
We facilitated I and a friend facilitated a case in a big national murder case. Afterwards, the meeting was between some of the survivors who testified for the prosecution and the defense attorneys. And we started the thing with some kind of symbol, and the survivor next to me, when she got it, said, "No, this is what we're going to use." And she had her own symbol. And we used it was a powerful meeting. I opened the eyes of the defense attorney and to the victims as well. So yeah, I think the symbolism of that piece is important.
We tried to use something similar to circles for jury members who'd been through a really horrific trial. And we first tried to get them to come back or go somewhere, but they didn't want to ever come back in that building again if they'd been through a terrible case. So we just would call them, ended up just calling them somebody that wasn't involved with the case, the counselor that wasn't involved in the case, would call them and talk to them about their fears. But we had big plans to do circles with those jury members, and it just didn't work out. I bet somebody does that somewhere.
It must really help to have this kind of support from within the system, as opposed to outsiders trying to pull together this thing. I mean, you had the blessing of the district attorney, and your position with victim services must have given you a lot of legitimacy in doing this.
Yes, I think it did. And but we have a new DA now. Ronnie retired, Rosemary Lindbergh, and she is just as interested in restorative justice. In fact, and she's got people who do those cases for her. But every now and then she'll ask me to come in and do a case, and I went in there. I guess it was last fall, and facilitated a case, just a victim offender mediation case, and I loved it. I still like to do it. But I'm old. I've got to do other things now, I guess. I'm feeling pretty good, though.
I am, too.
I know. You're supposed to be retired.
But you got to start doing some other things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Again, to the audience, I'd say send us some of your comments or questions if we don't have any on the screen right now.
Mm-hmm.
As you look at the restorative justice field, what do you think? I mean, there's been a lot of concern. Is it really living up to its promise to victims? Is it really, we talk big about how this is for both those who've been harmed and those caused the harm, but are we really living up to it? And how can we do it better? What are the challenges? What are your reflections about all that?
Well, I think there's always a challenge in making it an offender program, because sometimes the offender has to say about whether he wants to do it or not. But I think they focus more on the offender, and I had to work on that in my office, because a lot of cases they brought to me, they wanted the victim to talk, and they wanted him to say he was sorry and all that. But one of their thoughts was, this guy doesn't need to go to prison. And they were right. I mean, we had, with all kinds of cases, there were people early on thought the offender absolutely needed to go to prison, that after they'd meet with them, they'd find out in many ways this young man or woman or older man or woman were just like they were. And they changed their mind. They didn't ever let them off scot-free. We wouldn't have done that either, but they put them on probation rather than prison. I think that's one of the things you have to worry about, and that, people can use it for all kinds of different reasons. I know now they're using it in the schools. In fact, I think Minnesota was the leader of all that, and we're using it in schools now in Texas. And there's up at UT, through the School of Social Work, there is an Institute of Restorative Justice and Restorative Dialogue, and they're doing great things in the schools. I actually have a friend that is a principal of a school, an elementary school, and they're using her school as an example. I may get involved with that someday. But yes, please ask questions. If there's anything you want to know about me, I talk about everything. So if there's some questions you want to know about me, or you want to know about restorative justice, or how I got started, of course, I've been talking about that for the last 20 or 30 minutes. But please ask questions. We like to hear them. Mm-hmm.
Question here from Ellen. She says, how do you define restorative justice?
Oh, golly. It's between victims and offenders in the community, and they should all have a say and in the criminal justice system, and what should happen for the offender to best repay his victim in the community. There's so many out there, and Howard, I read a lot to get ready for this, and I read so many versions of what is restorative justice. I don't know. Why don't you answer that? You could do a better job than I could.
Well, there are a lot of definitions out there, and some people have argued there ought to be one definition, and well, I know there are dangers in it. I'm happier that there are a variety of definitions that, but I think the elements you mentioned, like addressing the harm, addressing the responsibilities for that harm, and allowing everyone who has a stake in it to participate in the process are key elements of the definition, at least to my mind.
I think that some criminal justice systems don't like it because it takes more time. Now, they don't look at the part that it brings healing to everybody to do these kinds of things. For them, they got all these cases to do, and they have to plea, and then they have to go to trial on some, and so it just takes longer, especially when we used to do sentencing circles, because we always have the prosecutor there. They enjoyed it after they came, though. So, I was lucky that I had two bosses, two DAs that loved the process, and they let me run with it. But I don't know. It's just the right thing to do. You just can't. It's not for everybody. Absolutely not for every case. But when there is a case, if we can do something restorative justice with it, it's just it's healing for everyone.
Go back a little bit to what we were talking about before with defense attorneys. There some people have argued that the real problem with getting this more widespread is prosecutors. But then other people say, well, no, it's really defense attorneys who are,
oh my goodness,
either
not
resisting it or
not
trying
in Travis County.
No.
They would ask for them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah, and I wouldn't let them be there. It was just between me. Oh my goodness, I can't tell you how many cases where the defense attorney would come up and ask a prosecutor, could you get Ellen to do a circle, do a mediation, do anything with these offenders? And as I say, the word grows. The word about it grows once you have a program that works. And so I just can't imagine why everybody doesn't try it. As I say, it takes more time. Somebody's going to have to work nights and long days and weekends maybe to make things happen. But when you get somebody that really loves what they're doing and loves victims, they won't ever have a problem with it. Of course, it was easy for me because my children were grown too. But
well, that's true. How do you handle the fact, though, that defense attorneys often are motivated by a desire to reduce or eliminate consequences?
Well, I just had to come to terms with that. And there's a lot of defense attorneys that I don't like at all. But then there's some that really want to do the best for their offender. And they may want to get him less of a sentence, but they also worry about him and the kinds of crimes he's done too. I mean, I've talked to so many that are like that. And every jurisdiction will have them. Those that they just want that guy to get out, free. And they don't care anything about really him as a human being, but they're the other ones too.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. And what I'm hoping is, my dream is someday law schools will help lawyers change their self-images from simply gladiators to healers and conflict resolvers.
Well, you see some of those. You really do.
Yeah.
I wish the world would grow.
Is that your dog?
Yes.
Ooh,
My kitty, if you can see, is, well, I don't know if you can see her. She's sleeping on the bed with another one of my dogs.
okay. Here's a question: how can these things happen outside the criminal justice system? I mean, you have the advantage of being an insider and having the legitimacy and so forth. How can they handle? I'm not sure if the question means how can you initiate these things from the outside, or whether can these things happen outside the criminal justice system. You can answer it either way you want to.
Well, I think they could. I think with the right case and if there's no money involved, I think that could happen outside the criminal justice system. We do have people who handle cases of conflict, and they have training to do that. And sometimes they'll get involved in these cases. I know that they helped with cases in the juvenile system. I only did one over there. And so I think there's a way to do it. If you want to do it, there'd probably be a way to do it.
Yeah.
You just have to ask around. Google it.
Yeah.
That's how I find out everything.
It's amazing what you can find out by Googling, isn't it?
That's it. It is.
Are there other challenges well, the other thing is, are there other areas that we could be applying this that we're not?
Well, we talked a little bit about restorative justice in schools and how to use that to handle problems in schools, but also businesses. I have Googled about restorative justice and many times in a couple of years since I've been gone, and businesses are using it. It's just pretty amazing to sit in a circle, use a talking piece. You can handle all kinds of things in all kinds of different places doing that. We actually handled an employee who was driving everyone crazy once. She didn't like it very much, though, so we'd probably never do it again, by sitting in a circle. And we were kind. We were very kind. And we had ways that we would talk to her about, what had been going on and that kind of thing. But I don't know that I'd ever do that with an employee again, especially since she was my employee. But we try. We try. Mm-hmm.
I think schools are probably the biggest growth area in restorative justice, not only in the United States, but worldwide. I mean, it's just really taking off in schools and making some dramatic results. I've seen results in reduction of school expulsions and so forth. It's dramatic.
Yeah. There's my dog again. I'm sorry. She's being noisy.
There's nobody else asking questions, so the dog's got to, fill in here.
Okay, ask some questions.
Let's see, I'm trying to think if I had other questions here. The Texas.
Well, one thing I did want to mention, that all the cases that I did something in, circles or mediations, or what we called in our office conversations, I never did one on sexual assault and never did one on domestic violence. I didn't think that I was the right one to try those. They're probably trying them now in different places, but I don't know. Those were off limits for me.
Well, that makes total sense. I mean, I know one state where I was working, we had originally said we wouldn't take any of those kind of cases, but there were so many victims knocking on the door wanting to do it that they actually, it's a fairly high percentage of what they do now. But you wouldn't want someone who's been through what you've been through to have to try to facilitate a case like that.
Yeah.
The Texas at the time used a pretty intensive process of getting prepared and then after debriefing afterwards. They still do. A lot of states don't do that as intensively. And they seem to have okay results. Do you have any comments on that?
Yes, I always checked in afterwards. I'd check in a couple of times. I'd maybe a week after, and then maybe a month or two after. And every time they were grateful they'd gotten to do it. And I mentioned before, there wasn't always forgiveness flowing there, but they got to hear somebody say they're sorry. That's important. And they got to tell them how it affected their lives. And that's important. I wish I had gotten to do that. But I'm at least grateful that I got to help other people do that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Here's a couple questions.
Okay.
Ellen again is one. It says Ellen mentioned your training in victim offender dialogue, but I was wondering if you could talk about your training in circle processes.
I got trained in the circle process a long time ago by Kay Pranis. She was kind of the master of the circle process.
Yeah, she's kind of the foremost trainer here.
Yes, she was. She was. It was a long time ago, but I used the techniques that she taught me in the circle process. And of course, she always had a talking piece. Sometimes it'd be a feather, or she may have something down on the floor as a talking piece, and something also in her hand. So, oh golly, I think I took several classes from her in how to facilitate circles, and so they really helped me when I started doing that. Just include everybody, be friendly. I always like it when people are in circles, if they don't use that as their time to scream. And I already told them that they don't do this. You have to speak with a respectful voice, and you can say how you feel, but don't yell and scream at someone. And so I don't know what others do. I just know what I did, and I know what Kay Prentice taught me to do. So there you go.
For those who are listening, Kay Prentice is the author of the Little Book of Circle Processes and a number of other books, but she and Carolyn Boyce Watson have a new one out for schools that just came out in the last month, kind of a handbook, and it's from Living Justice Press. So if you're interested,
really,
Google. Yeah, it's a fairly thick handbook. It's got all different kinds of situations, and it tells how to apply circles to those situations.
Oh my gosh, I want that one. Not that I'm ever going to do them again, but you never know.
You never know. You probably will. I have a book here, but yeah, if you look at Living Justice Press, their website, you'll
Living Justice Press.
Right.
Okay.
Google that.
Right.
The question there is, how can people get trained to do this kind of work? And I suppose they mean both circles and severe violence, victim of fire, offender dialogue. Get training.
I can't answer that. I know that because the system, TDCJ, doesn't provide training, that they're going to do it at UT. They're only going to train about 30 people, and it's going to be in March and through the School of Social Work. And they've got some great people there doing that. Marilyn Armour and of course, oh my goodness, I'm so embarrassed. I forgot her name. Oh, Stephanie Froge.
That's part of it.
And they're very, very good. So I know some people from the DA's office where I worked are going to go.
One of the problems right now, I think, in the field in this country is we don't have central training. A lot of what happens is various states are doing training for their own people, but they're not open to other people, and so that's been kind of an ongoing problem.
Well, you get some training at restorative justice conferences, and I know there's another one coming up this summer.
June, there's one, yes.
In June, and so you might get some training there. Of course, you know, will your office pay for you to go?
I know.
I don't know. That's always a problem. They paid for me to go to those conferences while I was there, but I don't know what they'll do now. I think it's just hard. There's not enough training around, and it needs to be something that is free.
Yeah, exactly. Here's a question again. From your personal experience as a survivor, how would you recommend a victim outreach liaison to initiate contact with a victim? What kind of questions would you ask? Now, they use the term victim outreach liaison, so my guess is they're talking about defense victim outreach here, and you know
could be
about that.
Oh, sure.
And so this is defense attorneys who want to provide opportunities for people who've been victimized to ask questions of them or find out what's most helpful to them in the trial process and so forth.
Yes, and it's Defense Initiated Victim Services.
Right.
I guess DEVO. That's what it's called here in Texas.
And
that's a great program. And really, I mean, I just think when you call a victim, you tell them who you are, and you ask if you could talk to them a while, and then you be kind of sensitive in the questions you ask them. But if they're coming back with you, you'll be able to feel your way along and know what to say. And then you might ask them if someone else could call them, or if they'd like to meet with their offender at the recommendation of a defense attorney. And, people think defense attorneys for the most part, think defense attorneys are bad, and they aren't. They really want the best for their client, and they are sensitive about victims. I love that DEVO program.
But
It's also at UT.
often victim services are opposed to that, though. I mean, some of the victim liaison people I know invite victim services to be to sit with them. But I mean, there's been
And you can do
a lot of
that.
resistance from that. I know.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
probably one of the questions is, how do you work that so that they don't feel like they're being undercut or?
Well, you invite them, the victim witness person, and some, in the cases that I actually call somebody, I will tell the victim witness person first what I was going to do. And you take your chances with that.
Yeah.
Because they could call a victim and say, don't you dare do this. This is terrible.
They do that sometimes.
And they will do it. But if they really understand that it's for the victim, it's that they can be there, they can make sure that nothing happens, they shouldn't be against it. I think that early on people decide there are just things they're going to be against and things that they're going to be for. And a long time it was restorative justice, period. And now that's getting so much better. Any of it, it was like, oh, we don't need that. But I just think every case is going to be different. I think you just approach the victim. You may talk to the victim's witness person for them, and then approach the victim like you would if they were, a family member. Just be kind. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I answered the question, because I just think with every case you have, it's going to be different.
It'll be different, and it's hard because there is a suspicion that the defense attorneys are going to use this to manipulate or for purposes.
It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I think that's a great program. So
here's a question. It says, you're in Texas. Are prosecutors doing this in other states? I don't know if they mean by this. I mean, just probably generally the kind of work you did while you were in the office.
Oh, yes. I mean, I know that there were maybe not prosecutors, but there somebody in their office that was doing that, and probably cases all over the United States. Howard, you probably know more about that than I would, though. What states are really involved in restorative justice, or what. I used to talk to people in other counties. I remember there was a man that worked at a prosecutor's office in Chicago. Gosh, I could wish I remember his name. But he was trying to get people to do things like that there. He loved it. So I know they're all over. Do you know of any yourself?
I know a few. One of the things we've talked about doing is getting together prosecutors who are involved in restorative justice for a retreat, just to encourage each other, learn from each other, and so forth. I haven't done it. Oh,
that'd be great.
But I think it would be a good thing to do.
Mm-hmm. If you could get on the agenda when they come together to do training, prosecutors and DAs come together to do training, get on the agenda. Of course, you may have nobody show up. We used to have that in the beginning. Yeah. Nobody would show up for anything about victims, but then they got better.
Got better. You think a term restorative justice is a problem? I mean, for one thing, a lot of people call it a lot of things restorative justice that aren't. But also people get a little cynical about the term. I mean, sometimes it seems politically astute just to not use that term. But
well, I don't know how we do it. I mean, it's so common now, and I think restore justice. I think that's good. I know that they talked about community justice in Austin. People use that term sometimes, and I guess they have other terms, but they all mean the same thing.
Community justice is pretty vague sometimes.
It is.
Community policing, for instance, meant so many different things that sort of lost its content.
Yes. Well, I never used the term, but other people did. I heard them use it for what I did. But I always use restorative justice because I really like the sound of it. It just it says good things. Yeah. Good things are coming if you use this.
You helped me with when I did the Transcending book with victims. Remember,
yes, I did.
You hooked me up with some people in Texas, and I would ask people that question. These were survivors, and many of them did like the term in some way. But they also, it was interesting. I asked them also language about, are you restoring your life, recovery, and all that, and they would often say these RE words are really problematic because you're not really going back. You're something new. And
you can't restore. Yes, I see that.
Yeah. But in
you'll never be the same.
And that it makes sense. Here's a question. Can you talk about accountability? I think some people think restorative justice is somehow giving offenders a slap on the wrist.
I know that question is right. Some people do think is giving them a slap on the wrist, but it doesn't mean that nothing is going to happen to them. They don't let them go. It means they've done the hardest. I think the hardest thing that any offender can ever do is sit down and face his victim and talk to them and tell them how he feels. That is not an easy task. And I think people who think it's a slap on the wrist, they just don't think about that. But it's not as if you do that and then all of a sudden they go off in the wilderness somewhere. They're held accountable for it in many ways. They, sometimes they still, I did them in all parts of the system. I did them sometimes early on between victim and offender before we even, before even trial was going to happen, and some great things happened in those cases. I did it after a trial. I remember a case where a young woman had driven drunk, and she was going the wrong way on the expressway and killed a young woman from a town near here. It was their only child. And what they wanted to know was this woman sorry for what she did. Well, we hadn't actually done the sentencing yet, but it was in between the time we were going to do it, and it already been decided on it. And they were so grateful to have been able to talk to her. So, yes, they still wanted her to go to prison, and she should have, but they loved being able to hear what she had to say about it. She never stopped crying.
Well, you watched the meeting with the killer. That is not easy on Gary. I mean, you made him face things. You, in the process, made him face things that he was just in denial about.
Yeah. He was. And
I like so much how in one of you move through each time you met him, and then you make him use the words, and you point out when he's using minimizing or denying words. I like that so much.
Well, thank you. Well, David Durfler helped me with that.
Yeah.
I would talk to him all the time, and he would always say, and don't let them minimize. Don't let them minimize. So, I thought I did a pretty good job on what I did there. But as I say, you can thank David for that.
It sounds like it's good sometimes to have a coach in the background, at least when you get started with these things, to talk things over with.
Yes. And I would kind of take notes and write things down after the mediation was over for the day. And I didn't call him every day, but I called him, quite a bit. And of course, I called him about meeting with victims too, with Linda and Amy. And he always gave me good advice. But he learned that I finally that I could do some of the things on my own, but from what he had taught me. So I didn't talk to him all the time, but it was good to have a coach.
Well, you can tell in there that also you're drawing on your own resources. I mean, it was very clear that a lot of this came natural to you.
Oh yeah, well, it did. I wouldn't take anything. I would never want to go back and become a victim of crime and have anything like that happen to me. But what I have learned since all of that happened I've appreciated all of it. It's made me a better person. It really has.
Well, the paradoxes, isn't it?
It is. It's a funny paradox, but it's true. And I bet there are people listening that whether you've been a victim or not, that if you're working with victims in any sort of way, just working with them, you can make a better person, because they're not all easy. Some are mad at you because they can't do anything about the offender in jail. So they take it out on you, but you just learn to handle so much and that kind of work you do. Okay, we have any more questions?
None there yet right now, but while we're waiting there, let me ask you another one. What advice do you give someone who's never been a victim is doing this kind of work? I mean, how you had the advantage, shall we say, of having been through it, and so you knew where they were coming from. What about someone who's not? How can they prepare themselves? How can they?
I haven't met very many people who do the kind of work that I did that come from a position of having been victimized, but I think they learn about it. First, they'll learn about it in, the studying and the degree they have to be able to do it. In our office, it was a social work degree, and most were masters of social work. And I wasn't, but, I had the experience. So, and then when you start working with victims, you get it pretty quick. You hear their stories and you learn what to say and what not to say. And there's things you would never say. Well, it happened for a reason. Of course, you're taught that in school and taught that in the ongoing kind of places that you go to get training. So it doesn't take you very long in working with victims to learn exactly what you need to say. And once again, you need to be a really good listener. And when they stop, you've got another question to ask them. And let them talk, because they, well, as I say, they need to tell their story. And you're maybe the first person or close to the first person that they've been able to tell it to. So you have to be a good listener.
Have you ever gotten together with other facilitators, mediators who have been victims? It would be interesting to see.
No,
I'd
have to really think a long time, but I don't think I ever knew anybody.
That would be interesting to get. Kim Book in Delaware, she runs her daughter.
I've heard of her.
Be fun to get some of you together sometimes.
I think it would too. I think we'd have a lot to learn from each other.
We'll have to play around with that idea. Maybe we can make it happen sometime.
I think that'd be great. We could do a webinar.
We can do it at one of these Zoom conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions here? We don't have any more on the board. We can end here early if we want to, but do you have other things you'd like to say about this? We've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah, we did. Let me think. I wrote down a quote from you, Howard, that when you do the kind of work that I was able to do, putting victims and offenders and sometimes community members and all together, you had this quote that said, "It was a way something good could come from something bad." And I read it the first time in your little book, and I read through it again because I use that quote a lot of times when I would talk in public about what I did or give speeches wherever I gave them. But it's a good thing to remember. It's something good that can come from something bad. But other than that,
it's important for people too, isn't it? I mean, we found that with offenders too, that one of the ways they want to know something good has come out of the terrible thing that they did. I mean, that seems to be one of the reasons that offenders who go through this process
that's exactly right.
Yeah, you could see
they were willing.
Gary said that, I think. Didn't he?
Yes, he did. Yeah, and he said, I remember, please don't think there's ever something you can't ask me to do. And Linda laid down some things for him to do, get his GED, which he did, and I can't remember the others now, but and he did, and he's in Beaumont, and he's leading a very good life, and he has a job, and he has a family that loves him. So I did find out that Gary had a brother once, and I actually talked to him, and I wanted him to get in touch with Gary, and he said that he couldn't. He was a grown man, but that Gary's mother did not want any contact with Gary, and that if she found out, she'd kick him out of the family. I don't ever understand all that, but I guess I'll never understand a mother that would let so many things happen to their child that like she did, as we pointed out in the film.
You know, I've often talked about how when you're victimized, you need to, I use the term, restore your life. You need to tell your story, as you've said, and what you're trying to do is to incorporate this thing that happened in the past into your story and find new meaning and so forth. More recently, I began to realize that offenders who turn their life around are doing the same thing. They're trying to restore their lives and bring who they were in the past together with who they are in the present and make meaning of it all. And when they do something good, it's a way of making meaning. And Shad Maruna, study called Making Good, found that he studied offenders who had turned their life around, who desisted from crime, he says. And what he found is that they had to figure out what to do with the old person they were and the new person, how to bring it together, and they had to find some way to do good with their life. And you could see that kind of in Gary's story there.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Well, as I say, I mean, my life was forever changed. I'm a different person I was then, and his life was ever changed, and he's now a different person. And it can happen on both sides.
It's hard to imagine this happening without that kind of experience, isn't it, when you think about it?
Yeah, yeah.
Here's a question. I am a RJ practitioner at a large university. I have a student who acted poorly to a police officer while intoxicated. He doesn't remember it, but he is on a police video body camera. The officer and the student want to watch the video together to have a dialogue. Should I have the student watch the video before watching with a police officer? Do you have any suggestions for me when watching the video together? This is the first time I have a police body camera video of an it stops. Well, no, maybe it's anyway. That you get the sense of it.
Yes, I do. And my first thought is no, they should watch it at the same time.
Well, I think too.
Yeah, and I think it'll. I love the thought of this. I think this is really, really good. Gosh, wish we'd have more police officers.
Kidding. But probably starting by talking about the values, the kind of way you do a circle. Wouldn't you want to start by addressing the atmosphere and how we're going to treat each other in this?
How they're going to treat each other, all those little rules that you lay down in the beginning. And in some cases you would never need them, but you always say them. And then if things get in any way out of hand, you stop it right there and jump in. If someone goes off, I mean, I had that happen a couple of times where somebody would get a little carried away. It wasn't bad, but I would just jump in, or maybe they were talking too long, like a 10-minute rant, and I would jump in and kind of put it to a halt. But I always did it with kindness. So I'd be excited about that. I'd love to find out. Email me and let me know how that goes.
Here's the reason. She's finished the sentence now. The reason she's asking whether the student should see it first is because the police officer has seen it. So the police officer's already seen it. Should the student see it for the first time when they're together, or should the student have the equal opportunity to see it beforehand?
I still think the student should see it for the first time. The student is thinking that nothing happened. Am I correct?
He doesn't remember it, he says.
He doesn't remember
it. I think, too, having it fresh. I mean, they've both agreed to do it, and they're going to do it with this kind of going into it with this attitude of respect. I think that'd be my answer.
Maybe he should see it, since the police officer's seen it. Of course, I would have known the police officer had seen it, but there's something about seeing something for the first time to realize, how you really were.
There is, and if the police officer is being willing to do this, it sounds like a safe atmosphere. And
I think it sounds safe to me.
Offenders, he's going to have a little tougher. He should have a little tougher. I would wait myself, I think, to let him see it for the first time when he's with the police officer.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's what we should do.
A great idea.
I wish more of them.
We might. This might be something we can use with our universities around here.
Yes. Get more police officers interested in restorative justice. And golly, we could start at the very beginning, way back, before they ever get here.
Well, we got some good things happening in our police department right now around these things. So,
like what?
Well, we're starting a new program, which hasn't been announced yet. But we're starting a program, a restorative justice program within the police department in Harrisonburg. And we have these universities here, so these are the kind of cases we're also seeing in this town. So I can imagine this kind of thing happening quite easily.
Do you know if it's going on anywhere else?
In what university?
In a police department?
There are other police departments. Yeah, there are a number of them. We've had one of the police chiefs on here in an early webinar talking about their program. There's a program up in Concord, Massachusetts, near Boston, and now has many jurisdictions part of it. It's not a community-based program, but it's housed in the police department. It's a cooperative. And the police department says it's just changing the relationship between and community. And our police department went up there and visited that police department and so forth to learn more about what they're doing. And, the next webinar, in fact, Jordan will be announcing that when we're done, but the next webinar will be with the woman who ran that program until recently. Another conversation like this in February.
Well, I'll have to watch that one.
So yeah, it should be interesting.
Now I'll be on the mailing list of all these webinars.
You'll send in the email. The questions. You can ask questions.
Okay, I'll do it.
Anything else you can think of? We're not out of time, but it's getting up toward
It's
the
getting.
end.
I had made some notes about what I wanted to talk about, but I think I've pretty much done them. I think I've talked about just about everything, and we've answered all the questions. I just want to thank you again for inviting me. I really enjoyed it. Took me back to my days doing all these cases, and I read through a bunch of them and checked into a bunch of your books, and there are many. I probably have one on here on my desk. Your little book of Restorative Justice. Oh.
There's a new edition of that coming out this spring. It is.
Mm-hmm. And I have case books in there too. I've been through all of them, just trying to remind myself about the proper words to use.
There's a whole movement among university conduct now about using restorative justice in university conduct issues. And so we have a whole group of meeting online like this who are wrestling with these issues together, particularly around things like sexual offending and that.
Yeah.
So that's a big expanding.
That's a, yeah.
And Caitlin, who asked that question, is she's at the University of Oregon, and she says that she will send us an update once they've had the circle process. This is with the police officer in the body cam. Caitlin.
I think that's great. That's just great. Oh gosh. Yeah. I just know it'll be an amazing time for her, for everyone.
I'm confident of that too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much. Part of it has just been the treat of seeing you again after all this time.
I know it. You need to come to Austin again.
Oh, I haven't been there for a long time.
Or I should come there and take some training or something.
You should come out for us sometime, or one of our gatherings or something.
Yeah.
In mind.
Well, keep me in mind. Yes.
Right.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you. I did too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, we'll see you again, and I'll let you know if there are any responses that come in later. I can send them on to you.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Well, we'll turn it over to Jordan now. He's going to tell us a little about what's coming up in the future. So.
All right.
Assuming we figure out how to.
Listen, y'all have done a perfect job.
Well, first of all, thank you both to Alan and Howard for facilitating a really, really insightful conversation. And thanks to everyone for chiming in with your questions. And I see we also have one phone call listener. So for that phone call listener, make sure to check out online. We'll have this video recording available if you want to check out some of the slides that I'm about to share. So as Howard mentioned, we have some pretty exciting opportunities coming up through the Zehr Institute. And let me get rid of those.
This technology on the webinars changes from time to time, so we're always kind of on a learning curve here.
Okay.
Yeah, as Howard mentioned, that first webinar coming up is on February 25th. That's with Jennifer Larson-Sawen, and she has done some really interesting work with a unique community police nonprofit that was founded in 2000 in the greater Boston area, and she's going to speak from her experience with that. On March 30th, we're going to have a conversation with Dennis Gingrich, and that's a conversation that we are looking forward to very much. And in April, we stay tuned. We're going to have another webinar that's coming up in April. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, the Zehr Institute is a part of the Center for Justice and Peace Building, which is embedded within Eastern Mennonite University. EMU offers a full array of undergrad programs, including peace building and development majors, graduate programs through the Center for Justice and Peace Building, such as the Masters in Conflict Transformation. There's also the seminary program and the Summer Peace Building Institute, which we will talk about in just one second here. There's also a really, really great program on trauma resilience called Strategies for Trauma Awareness and Resilience, and there are some courses coming up with that as well. The Summer Peace Building Institute is a really exciting time at CJP and on campus here. There are 3 classes if you have some interest in this topic of restorative justice, or if you have some experience and you want to go a little bit deeper. There are 3 courses being offered this summer. 1, Restorative Justice, the Promise, the Challenge, which is kind of our introductory course to concepts and philosophy related to restorative justice and what it has to offer, and some of the challenges that the field is facing. So if you liked what was discussed today, that's a great course to check out. That's with Lorraine Stutzman-Amstutz and Michelle Armster. Also, we have a really neat look at developing restorative organizations and taking kind of the philosophy of RJ and restorative practices and how we integrate that into our organizations and our workplaces. And that course is going to be taught by David Brubaker, who's one of the faculty members of CJP, and Sagal Shoam. And the 3rd course will be on Justice in Transition, looking at restorative and indigenous applications in post-war context, and that is with CJP's Carl Stauffer. The strategies for trauma awareness and resilience trainings are coming up as soon as February 2nd. There are kind of 2 different levels here. Star Level 1 is an introduction to the content related to trauma awareness and resilience. This is a really powerful course, very good training. For those of you who are interested in topics around RJ, there's a lot of space for having trauma-informed practices, and there's a lot of benefit to taking a course like this. All of the dates that are listed here are the offerings that are coming up. If you are already completed the Star Level 1 training, or if you have ideas about using that training in the future, Star Level 2 is for those of you who wish to use the Star training materials and hold trainings of your own using that material. As you can see, there's currently a wait list available for the April session for the Star Level 2 session, and it will be offered again in the fall. CJP offers a full master's in conflict transformation. This is a program that I'm currently a student in. This is my first year in the program. It's generally a 2-year program. CJP is pretty well known for its practice-based curriculum, and so there's a lot of emphasis on not only analysis and different lenses for examining conflict, but also a strong emphasis on practice and being what we call a reflective practitioner here. Some very popular areas that students focus on will be restorative justice and psychosocial trauma, and some of the other topics listed here. Or if you're just interested in learning more about restorative justice, if you have some experience and looking for a way to sharpen some skills or go deeper with the material, CJP also offers a graduate certificate in restorative justice. You can do this while you continue to work, kind of reflect on your own experiences and increase your skills and knowledge in this field. So those are some of the exciting opportunities that we have coming up, and we hope that you can join us. All of these opportunities are listed on our website. You can search for us, the Zehr Institute, on a web browser search, or find us through the EMU website. And Howard, I'll hand it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Jordan. And thank you, Ellen. And by the way, I will mention that the March webinar has to do with schools. Dennis Gingrich is in the school system in Canada, and here that won't be a school-oriented session. So join us again sometime, and these will be recorded and online, and they're free, so there will be a lot more people viewing these things at a later date. They just don't get to ask questions.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us, and come back next month, and have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye. See ya.
Mhm.